This is a sample of the information provided as part of the flexible training resources available through HACCP.com. Our training courses are designed to provide training participants with an understanding of food safety and quality system elements and also offer user-friendly assessment activities and competency checklists to complete the training cycle. Key definitions for site and supply chain biosecurity. Biosecurity. Biosecurity is a term used to describe procedures or measures designed to protect the population or geographical areas against harmful biological or biochemical substances or materials. Contractor, a procured service or product provider within a business premises. Visitor, uninvited, expected, welcomed or accommodated visitor to a business premises. Site and supply chain biosecurity development. When considering the development, documentation and implementation of site and supply chain biosecurity within food safety and quality management systems, the following information should be considered to ensure effective outcomes. About site and supply chain biosecurity. Restricting and controlling access. Communication of known issues. Entry and exit policies. About site and supply chain biosecurity. Site and supply chain biosecurity must be risk assessed, controlled and monitored on an ongoing basis to ensure appropriate outcomes are maintained. HACCP risk assessments are commonly used to identify specific potential hazards that may result from a lack of control in site and supply chain biosecurity. Hazards such as pests, diseases and invasive species are commonly considered as part of biosecurity risk assessments. What is at stake from poor biosecurity controls? The outcomes of poor biosecurity controls may include increased costs, including for monitoring activities, production practices, chemical use and labor. Reduced productivity due to compliance impacts. Loss of registration, certification or business access. Business reputational damage. Despite the complexity and broad spectrum of potential biosecurity hazards, a number of quick and simple methods can be applied to reduce risk, restricting and controlling access. The restriction and control of access is one of the most critical elements in maintaining effective and efficient site and supply chain biosecurity programs. Potential security measures may include perimeter controls through the use of fencing, gates, guard stations, and keycard or radio frequency emitting device access. All entryways, windows, vents, and delivery docks should be secured. Exterior lighting and closed-circuit camera systems may also be used to support outcomes. Communication of known issues. If you are aware of general or specific site and supply chain biosecurity hazards, these should be communicated to relevant persons in a clear and concise manner. Such communications should be formally managed to ensure they reach their intended targets. Contemporary site and supply chain biosecurity systems may include the digital dissemination of known biosecurity risk. It is also important that some biosecurity hazards are legally obliged to be communicated to regulatory authorities where they are observed. Failure to comply with this requirement may potentially result in a regulatory breach which could have further business impacts. General and specific signage. General and specific site and supply chain biosecurity signage should be used to continually promote awareness of risk. This may include additional signage where no biosecurity risks are evident. Where the transport of sensitive materials is involved, signage may also include prescribed regulatory or industry documentation for the movement of such items. For example, transfer certificates may be required for the movement of sensitive materials from one geographical area to another. About visitor and contractor management. It is paramount to food safety that visitors and contractors behave and conform appropriately when interacting with any part of the food supply chain. Any visitors and contractors and their actions are the responsibility of business management. Visitors and contractors entering a risk area should, where appropriate, wear protective clothing and adhere to the other hygiene provisions within this section. A policy to this effect should be documented, and a copy provided to each contractor and visitor prior to entry the site. As elements of established site security protocols, employees of the businesses should be encouraged through specified training to challenge anyone seen within operational areas of the site if they are not appropriately identified or accompanied by an authorized person. Entry and exit policies. It is generally considered standard practice for visitors and contractors to be signed into a site and be identified by an appropriate badge. Visitors may also be required to review documented materials relating to biosecurity prior to admission to critical areas of operations. Depending on the purpose of the visit, visitors, contractors and internal staff not attired appropriately may be required to wear a hygienic outer covering such as a disposable jumpsuit. Visitors and contractors should be accompanied by an authorized staff member at all times unless they have conducted appropriate induction training and have passed established medical and security screening protocols. Entry and exit provisions for biosecurity risk scenarios may include notification to an authorized person prior to entry or exit including confirmed approval to proceed. Detailed instructions and flow process steps for entry and exit, including use of designated entry and exit points, access point management and time frame segregations. Change of clothing or use of effective coverings. Chemical sanitation of footwear, vehicles and equipment. Review of biosecurity risk-free status certification documentation. Confirmation of formal notification methods for observed hazards. Where hygiene maintenance is required for entry and exit, appropriately constructed and maintained facilities and amenities must be provided at all times commensurate with biosecurity risk. Visitor and contractor training. For higher risk scenarios, it is common for a visitor and contractor induction process to be developed, documented and implemented to ensure the ongoing compliance of visitors and contractors. This is particularly important where, for example, maintenance contractors are used long-term and are permitted to work unaccompanied within biosecurity risk areas. In this context, it is important to consider that visitors and contractors, though they are expected to comply with the standard policies and procedures, may not totally appreciate their legal responsibilities in meeting such requirements. In instances where, for example, maintenance contractors are used long-term, it is also common for re-inductions to be scheduled, conducted and recorded to ensure ongoing compliance with the nominated visitor and contractor requirements. If your food business supplies foodstuffs manufactured to a customer's specifications, it is important to consider any specific site and supply chain biosecurity development requirements in relation to their items. Document. A document provides guidance and/or direction for performing work, making decisions, or rendering judgments which affect the safety or quality of the products or services that customers receive. Documented policies, procedures, work instructions and schedules form the basis of any food safety and quality management system. The following documentation formats may be considered to ensure ongoing compliance with specified requirements for site and supply chain biosecurity. Site and Supply Chain Biosecurity Policy. Site and Supply Chain Biosecurity Development Procedures. Site and Supply Chain Biosecurity Implementation Procedures and Work Instructions. Site and Supply Chain Biosecurity Monitoring Procedures. Site and Supply Chain Biosecurity Corrective and Preventative Action Procedures. Site and Supply Chain Biosecurity Verification Schedule. Site and Supply Chain Biosecurity Verification Procedures. Site and Supply Chain Biosecurity Validation Schedule. Site and Supply Chain Biosecurity Validation Procedures. Site and Supply Chain Biosecurity Training Procedures. If your food business supplies foodstuffs manufactured to a customer's specifications, it is important to consider any specific site and supply chain biosecurity documentation requirements in relation to their items. You may wish to visit the Site and Supply Chain Biosecurity Template section of HACCP.com for examples of site and supply chain biosecurity documentation, record and resource formats commonly applied within food safety and quality systems. Implementation. Implementation is the application of documented food safety and quality system elements into the actual business operation. The implementation of site and supply chain biosecurity within any food business requires genuine commitment from senior management, staff and visitors to ensure the nominated goals of implementation are achievable on an ongoing basis. It is a step which requires significant planning and consideration of general and specific food business circumstances to ensure the outcomes of site and supply chain biosecurity do not negatively impact upon the safety and quality of the food items dispatched from the business. Implementation of site and supply chain biosecurity must include the clear definition of responsibilities and authorities for all levels of participation by senior management, staff and visitors to the site. When implementing site and supply chain biosecurity within a food safety and quality system, you may wish to consider the following requirements prior to completion: communication and display of the site and supply chain biosecurity policy. Completion of verification and validation of site and supply chain biosecurity development procedures. Availability of site and supply chain biosecurity implementation procedures and work instructions. Availability of site and supply chain biosecurity monitoring procedures and record templates where applicable. Availability of site and supply chain biosecurity corrective and preventative action procedures and record templates where applicable. Availability of the site and supply chain biosecurity verification schedule. Availability of site and supply chain biosecurity verification procedures. Availability of the site and supply chain biosecurity validation schedule. Availability of site and supply chain biosecurity validation procedures. Completion of site and supply chain biosecurity training procedures. Completion of product design and development requirements related to site and supply chain biosecurity. Completion of process design and development requirements related to site and supply chain biosecurity. Completion of training for team members who have responsibilities and involvement within site and supply chain biosecurity. Completion of competency approval for team members who have responsibilities and involvement within site and supply chain biosecurity. Did you know that HACCP.com includes resources that allow you to create, manage and implement GFSI and HACCP-based food safety and quality programs? Improve your food safety and quality skills and knowledge? Train and develop your team to create better food safety and quality outcomes? Find suppliers and service providers to partner with your business? The information and training resources available through HACCP.com included a variety of formats, such as website content, MP4, MP4 and text, MP3, PDF and slideshow. Are you ready to take the next step in your food compliance journey? Visit HACCP.com today to create your profile and access the full versions of our food safety and quality information packages and much more.